Okay. Welcome to our new board members, our long-suffering board members, and to everybody, to the staff, to the July Capital Program Committee. Do we have members of the public scheduled to provide comments, Ms. King?
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. We have 3 in-person registered speakers and 1 remote for a total of 4 people today. As a reminder, we ask that all public speakers adhere to the MTA's rules of conduct and decorum. I would also like to remind our public speakers that in the interest of time and fairness to all speakers, we limit everyone to 2 minutes. Please be aware that there will be a warning beep to remind you that you have 30 seconds to conclude your remarks. The first speaker will be Mark Winthrop, followed by Bradley Brashears, and after Bradley Brashears would be Jason Anthony.
Hi, my name is Mark Winthrop. I live at the corner of 68th and Lexington Avenue, and I attend services at Park Avenue Synagogue on 68th Street, and I'm very friendly with my neighbors at Hunter College. I'm here to express my continuing concern about the elevator being relocated from the original southeast corner of 68th and Lex to the northeast corner. If you look at the renderings, which were provided, and I have copies if anybody would like one, it's clear that the aesthetic of the original design far exceeds that of the new design. The stairs and the elevator are crowded into a small sidewalk space where there's very little room to maneuver when you exit the elevator, whether you're handicapped or pushing a stroller. And anyone coming up the new stairway will be walking right into a very busy garage driveway. It's only a matter of time until a child runs up the stairs and into a moving car. If you look at the elevator on the south side, it's a gorgeous design. It's beautiful architecturally, and it's a beautiful addition to this corner, and it makes everything work together. It was done excellent. It provides protection from the elements to folks using the elevator, and the safety and convenience far exceed the northeast corner, since one only need to walk a few feet to get to the bus stop without having to cross any streets. It's my understanding that the reason this was moved is because CUNY and the MTA could not agree on who would be responsible if there were structural problems during construction related to liability and the potential for future use of the CUNY building. We should not be making a bad urban planning decision because 2 taxpayer-funded agencies can't agree on liability. And to add to this, I think the folks at Hunter believe that this is the best use for that space. I'd urge you to take a hard look at whether or not we're doing the right thing by everybody in the neighborhood, leaving it on that corner. And in closing, I'd like to say that the guys at Forte are doing a really nice job on the construction. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Our next speaker is Bradley Brashears.
Good afternoon. I'm Bradley Brashears, Associate Director at the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA, PCAC. Another summer, another season of downpours, tropical storms, and extreme heat. We all know what that means for our transit system: flooding, delays, and service outages, and unsafe conditions for riders. We saw this last week and thank the MTA's impressive crews for restoring service as soon as possible. Unfortunately, the worsening climate crisis means all of us must come together to protect our city, region, and transit from the elements. We're encouraged by the work you've already begun to make the system more resilient in the face of extreme weather. Last month's board presentation identified many of the problem areas around the subway system, and know that your proposed solutions like raised entrances, covered grates, and other flood-proofing measures will help. But as the MTA IG pointed out in their report last week, preparing for the next Sandy or Ida will require extensive coordination and forewarning both within the MTA and with the city to ensure that these tools can be deployed effectively. Amending the capital program is an important step toward making the structural improvements, including at the already identified Dykeman Street trouble spot, which saw torrential flooding that resulted in closures and delays. It won't be cheap, but the cost of delaying resiliency upgrades are far greater than proactively acting now. This also means investing in improvements that will help us face other weather events beyond hurricanes and rainstorms, including but not limited to extreme heat and fires we're seeing around the globe. Congestion pricing will continue to be one of our region's greatest tools to fight the climate crisis, both by reducing greenhouse gas emissions caused by driving and by funding these critical improvements to our transit system. We know the MTA cannot face these threats alone. Continued work by the city to increase the capacity of the sewer system and to protect our waterfronts will be critical. We're glad to hear that you're coordinating with the agencies to identify and address vulnerable locations. Transit is the antidote to climate change, and investing in resiliency will be the antidote to the effects we're already experiencing. Riders need resiliency to be a top priority to keep them moving through rain, snow, heat, or sun. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Our next speaker is Jason Anthony.
Hey, Jano. Jason Anthony from Amazon Labor Union. First of all, I want to address one of our public speakers that first, tomorrow is the 32nd anniversary of the American Disabilities Act that was passed 32 years ago. And that public speaker should know that that is a federal law. We should know that our subway system is not fully ADA accessible, and 68th Street, Hunter College, should be accessible because other systems like SEPTA, Washington Metro, CTA in Chicago, LA Metro, the urban train in San Juan, Puerto Rico, among others, are fully accessible. So, Mark, we should know that our subway system should be ADA accessible, because if not, if we don't comply with that federal law, that Metropolitan Transportation Authority is in violation of that federal act. That's right, Jerry. Our subway system is in federal violation, and that applies to Metro North and the LIRR as well. And every subway system, in other words, the whole 472 subway stations, including all LIRR stations and Metro North stations, should be accessible as well. So I'll see you guys in finance.
Thank you for your comment. Our final speaker is Andy Pollock.
Thank you. So, hi, Jano. Hi, everyone. So, a couple things that I want to address this month before the end of the summer. Number one, let's talk about the M3s. Well, they're coming back to the Long Island Railroad, but some people in Long Island are not realizing that these trains are going to be around for another 5 years because the M9A fleet is not ready. There's still production delays in Nebraska. So I understand that, again, people are upset about this. You got to realize that in 5 years' time, you're going to miss these trains. They're not going to be around anymore. So take some pictures, look out the rear window, make the most out of your time on the M3s, because once it's 2027 and once we get that new fleet in, you're really going to regret it. So last point I want to make, and this is a bigger issue for me, the brand new buses are taking longer than usual to get to Queens Village Bus Depot. And that means we're stuck with the same Orion 7 old gen fleet on the Q46, Q27, and the Q88 bus. So I know this is hopefully going to be temporary, but we would like some new buses in Northeast Queens because it's long overdue. And especially because I remember when the RTSs were still on the road. Yeah, so we don't want to have longer than usual wait times for the new fleet to come. So with that, I'm going to conclude my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that concludes the public comment session.
Thank you, Ms. King. Copies of the June Capital Program Committee minutes have been distributed and are available on the website. Are there any changes or comments on the minutes? Oh, my
Wow, look at
goodness.
that. Actually, Mr. Chair, I apologize. My name was misspelled, so it
Oh,
would be
boy.
correctly spelled.
You know,
That'd be great.
we all, for a moment, were cherishing the situation where Mr. Albert was going to let us pass.
I'm sorry.
But we never want to misspell the names of our board members, especially new ones. I've tried to misspell Mr. Brown's name for years, and I won't pull it off. Okay. With that
Thank you.
clarification, can I have a motion to approve?
So
Second, all in favor, minutes are approved. Michael, are there any changes to the work plan?
No, Mr. Chairman, no changes to
Okay.
the work plan.
Thank you. Let me before I turn it over to Jamie for President's update, I want to acknowledge with the retirement of Tom Savio that the Office of Construction Oversight has been realigned to report to Michelle Woods, who leads our audit operation. Michelle's going to work closely with our newly consolidated capital program team at MTA C&D and will oversee the IEC. Michelle, thank you for taking on this important role. Jamie, please proceed.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I'll also express our appreciation working with Michelle and also Michael Jugerald's acting as the acting head of construction oversight, and the relationship we have with the independent engineer is something that's quite unique for the MTA, but very productive, and we appreciate it and seeing it move forward. We have a busy agenda today, Chair, with a few items, so let me make a fairly brief preview of that and a report. There are three big things on the agenda today. First of all, we'll be introducing or previewing a capital plan amendment to go to the full board on Wednesday of this week. This is generally following a best practice for transparency, which has been recommended by previous audits of the capital program. And so it's a good practice for us to do that on a regular basis, as you'll hear, but it also reflects important updates in how we're accelerating certain priority projects and acknowledging some important realities related to inflation, ridership, and delivery of rolling stock. Second, our Deputy Chief Development Officer for Planning, Frederica Cuenca, will give us an update on the progress on our 20-year needs assessment leading to the next 5-year capital program, including this month the approach that we're taking to evaluating some of the long-term project ideas that have been put out there in the lead up to the next program through a comparative evaluation. I want to emphasize up front that projects being on that list doesn't mean that there are hard commitments of the MTA at this point, but rather, for the first time, we're taking an objective approach, as you'll hear, to evaluating their costs and benefits so that we can look at them all on a level playing field. We'll also hear from Barney Gray, who runs our stations group today. Last month, the board heard about the MTA's historic commitment to make 95% of stations accessible by 2055. The stations group is the unit that's responsible for that commitment, seeing it through, and we're ramping up their capacity to do so. As we've said many times before, we've made 15 stations accessible since 2020, which is a considerable increase in our pace. We've awarded 23 more stations through contracts to be made accessible, and we have 13 more awards planned for this year. And as we've mentioned, we're using every tool available in our toolbox, bundling, using design build, using a new innovative public-private partnership model for advancing station accessibility work. So that's all very exciting. But also I wanted to emphasize that our stations group is responsible for rehabilitating stations, renewing components, which is critical state of good repair work that we're deeply committed to. And we're also using every tool that we have available to us to do so. As has been noted in the last few days, we recently also announced an initiative to do station refresh work with New York City Transit to improve those exterior conditions in stations that are most apparent to the riding public, so that when we're closing stations or conducting outages to do serious infrastructure work, we also are giving back those stations looking great and cleaned up, taking advantage of piggybacking on those outages in order to do it. And we recently did this on the concourse line, the B&D, started doing that, and we'll continue to do that throughout the upgrade of the concourse line. Also, Chair, this last month, we released an RFP to move forward with the design of Penn Station reconstruction. We expect to be back to the board in the early fall to proceed with this contract. And I also wanted to note that we're briefing the Finance Committee in the next hour on a negotiated expansion of our transit wireless arrangement, which puts us on a path to expand wireless cell signal service to all of the tunnels throughout the entire system, and also Wi-Fi to the rest of the above-ground stations in the system as part of over $1 billion in benefits to the MTA and our riders over the next few years. With that, Chair, I'll pass it back over to you to introduce the capital plan amendment. Or I can if you want.
First, we're going to give you a preview of the capital program amendment. The capital program amendment now follows, which will be voted on by the full board on Wednesday. Jamie, if I'm going to throw it directly to Tim, you're going to have some opening remarks, and then we'll hear from Tim Mulligan, Deputy Chief Development Officer, to go through some details. Jamie.
Thank you very much. Just to open things up, I wanted to just place this in context. It's important for us to continue to do capital plan amendments on a regular basis, but the context for this is that we're making lots of good progress on our capital program. That's one of the reasons why we need to do some amendment work. Of course, the committee is aware that there were disruptions related to COVID that led to essentially a pause in the capital program for about 15 months at the beginning of this 20 to 24 program. So nonetheless, we've made a significant amount of progress implementing the program since then. As you see on the slide, we've committed 17% of the 20 to 24 capital program since through June. We're on track for 27% by the end of the year. And I also want to note we've been as transparent as we can be. We have now announced, and it's listed on our website, what our planned advertisements for future contracts are leading deeply into 2023. So we've put a lot of information out there about what we're awarding, and we're making good progress, also having accelerated $2.3 billion worth of work during the COVID pandemic. Implementation of the program is back on track and ramping up, and I want to acknowledge our Deputy Chief Development Officer for Delivery, Mark Roche, who runs our delivery unit. We did initiate $8 billion in projects in 2021. We're on track for $8.1 billion worth of projects for this year, and we're continuing to ramp up that pace of commitments. And what that means is, as I mentioned earlier, we're getting stations made accessible. We've done $3 billion or more in state of good repair. We've brought CBTC signaling into operation on the Queens Boulevard West line with additional projects underway, and a lot more work that's underway right now. We anticipate hitting approximately $9 billion in completed projects this year in 2022. And very importantly, and certainly a focus for me in working at construction and development, is the effort to contain costs. We've talked a lot about that. We have more to come that we intend to introduce to the committee to update you about what we're doing. But just to emphasize, we brought the median contract, the typical contract, in 8% lower than our estimated cost last year, and in fact have been even more successful in certain contract types, including what we call the A+B bid contract that came in over 15% lower than estimated costs. We also told you last month that we achieved almost $100 million in savings on our insurance costs for the next year. And as I mentioned earlier, we're deploying every tool that's available to us to try and really succeed in bringing projects in better, faster, and cheaper. So that's the context for the plan amendment. And with that, I'll pass it on to Tim Mulligan to walk you through.
So why a plan amendment? As Jamie mentioned, this is part of the regular course of business for us to administer the capital plan. Capital plan is a forecast. It's merely a plan. As you execute the projects, you get low bids, you get scope adjustments, you incur inflation and other market conditions that require you to periodically level up the projects and and put the plan back into alignment with the execution you're experiencing. So the Crow audit back in 2019 recommended that we do this on an annual basis. COVID has thrown us off that cadence a little bit, but we're coming with the first comprehensive plan amendment. We did a targeted letter amendment back in December that was really focused on facilitating the design build construction award for PIN access, but this is a more comprehensive plan amendment. So moving to the substance, the plan amendment includes funds for new projects and accelerated projects. We're accelerating Metro North's Park Avenue Viaduct project, which was originally to be split over two plans over the next 10 years. For the first phase, we've combined phase 1 and phase 2, 7 contiguous blocks, and we're doing that all at once. There's obvious design, construction, and mobility savings associated with doing that, as well as less community and customer impact. And we're excited not only because that is a major, brainstem of the Metro North operations, where all the lines come together to come into Grand Central, and it's essential to service, but also has a lot of community expectations of how we can improve the streetscape and lighting and the conditions in the community around that project. We're accelerating ADA work on Long Island Railroad by increasing the number of ADA stations. So we'll be progressing with construction at Amityville, Laurelton, Lyndhurst, and Massapequa Park, and design for Forest Hills, Hollis, Douglaston, and Cold Spring Harbor. Additional new projects that we're adding coming out of the track trespassing initiative, including platform screen doors pilot, as well as cameras and other technologies that deal with protecting our customers and protecting the track from intrusion. And resiliency projects that were mentioned by some of our speakers are in fact being put into the program as part of this amendment to deal with the increasing challenge of flash flooding. Bridges and Tunnels is adding projects that address bike and pedestrian accessibility and expand our micro-mobility initiatives. Another major element of the amendment is continued support of the expansion projects, PIN Station Access, which, as I said, we awarded the construction for in December. At the time, we acknowledged that there was additional expenditures to come for that project, including the procurement of rolling stock, as well as a new yard that is essential for opening day operation. So that yard is an option under the awarded contract. We need to award that option by the end of the year. This amendment funds that yard and funds 2 of the 3 elements of rolling stock necessary, the locomotives and the auxiliary power vehicles that are necessary to run Metro North service into Penn Station. The amendment also funds the design funds necessary for PIN reconstruction. And, as mentioned before, there's also just a lot of small adjustments across the program that adjust for the inflation. Obviously, the inflation we're experiencing is higher than the inflation that was forecast back in 2018 and 19 when the plan was put together, and we're adjusting for that inflation for the projects we've awarded and the projects that are in the pipeline to be awarded. Also, the rolling stock schedules have been a challenge due to the supply chain disruption of COVID, and rolling stock is a perennial challenge in terms of on-time delivery, and that's only been exacerbated by the current market conditions. And while that's disappointing for operations and for our customers, it does provide us a little bit more flexibility financially as we can, sort of cash flow. When you get the equipment later, you're able to pay the invoices later, which gives you more flexibility on funding other priorities. One of the major elements of the amendment is the resequencing of signal modernization, and we got into this a couple months ago in this committee, but obviously when we put the plan together, we really had to divide our investment between reliability, state of good repair, and capacity needs. And because of the challenges in the rolling stock environment, as well as our post-COVID ridership reality, it allows us to focus more directly on reliability, state of good repair, and equity issues in terms of which lines we select. So we're really focusing on replacing our signals, that are 80 to 90 years old with this reprioritization, as well as prioritizing lines that serve essential workers and communities that are most reliant on public transit. So the Fulton line, which is the AC through Central Brooklyn, and the F line as it runs through the Central Business District, interlined with 3 other lines. Those 3 lines are the most challenged for reliability when you look at weight assessments. They're the only 3 lines in the system that have weight assessment performance numbers below 60%, and all 3 of those will be addressed with this resignaling. This slide just depicts everything we're doing for signal modernization in the 20 to 24 program. Queens Boulevard Line East, which is out to Jamaica, has already been awarded and is being finalized design and being mobilized for construction. We talked about the AC through Central Brooklyn that also includes the crucial J Street interlocking, which is an existing choke point, which is bedeviled our customers in terms of even supporting our existing scheduled throughput. The Crosstown, which is an important service serving Brooklyn and Queens, running through Bed-Stuy, and of course, a much more robust extension of 6th Avenue, not just dealing with the 63rd Street Tunnel, which was originally in the plan, but extending it all the way through Manhattan and into Brooklyn. As for the overall size of the program, it's very little changed. The envelopes increased by about $108 million, and that really reflects the $100 million that we received from the state to support PIN reconstruction design and preliminary work, as well as $8 million from the state of Connecticut for Metro North work in the capital plan. For funding, this chart sort of updates the funding chart you're familiar with from the original 20 to 24 plan, and I'll just call out the major change. It recognizes the additional federal formula money that the Biden Infrastructure Act has enabled us to receive within the 20 to 24 plan. Some of that extends beyond the plan into the next capital plan. So that brings in an additional $1.67 billion, and that is shoring up the funding of this plan, and it allows us to take down our reliance on MTA bonds and PAYGO from $9.8 billion to around $8 billion. Which, under the current ridership and financial market conditions, obviously makes the plan more stable. I just want to highlight that there's, a lot of funds and federal revenue that's available under the Infrastructure Act that doesn't come in the form of, this as-of-right formula aid, but is in competitive grants that have to be applied for and competed against other properties and locations around the country. Those funds are only reflected in the capital plan typically after we've competed successfully and been awarded those executed grants. So we look forward to additional grant funds coming in from the Infrastructure Act as we compete successfully for those awards that will allow us to do more work. Finally, this table shows you agency by agency the changes that are proposed in the plan amendment. It includes the December amendment, which is the second column, the changes that were made as part of that amendment, and the final column on the right is the incremental changes in this amendment, including the funding of the additional expenses for PIN access. And I just want to point out that the PIN access budget that was discussed in December has not changed. These are consistent with those funding obligations that we discussed in December, although we only took care of, from a funding perspective, the pieces that were necessary to award the design build award. It is not a change in the overall project budget. And then the bottom line reflects the rather modest change to the overall size of the plan.
One extra point that Jamie's going to make.
Yeah, sure. And I'll just note, as you were saying, that what is evident is that we are continuing to fund the Penn Station Access Project, which is a critically important equity project for a transit desert in the East Bronx, and much improved service into Penn Station, the Central Business District, for riders of Metro North. We also, to Tim's other point, are aggressively seeking federal funding that will allow us to bring in funding that is not seen here to fund Penn Access. And we have a real commitment from our delegation, Senator Schumer and others, to ensure that we do get that funding. So that's coming up, and that's a really important contribution to our plan.
So just to put a finer point on that, that would reverse some of what is in effect were those, can you go back to it, Tim? The funding plan, that slide? Yeah. So the borrowings from the operating agencies that ended up in network expansion to fund Penn Access are potentially, and we're counting on the delegation. Remember, this was an element of the deal that Senator Schumer brokered between us and Amtrak when we were trying to cost allocate the Penn Access project, which has so much state of good repair for Amtrak on that line, but also expands from a 2-track railroad to a 4-track railroad with all of the expansion that we need. Part of that settlement was that supported by that commitment from Senator Schumer to help us to pursue funding from one of the new Biden infrastructure plan categories, and then called the Fed-State Partnership Program, that would allow us to reverse some of those parenthetical subtractions. So we view those adjustments as in large part borrowings that we hope will be reversible once we see that program is set up. It's not yet set up, and we have a crack with the delegation support at getting some money out of it, right? Okay, Andrew, Mr. Albert.
Yeah, I would just thank you, Tim, for that and say I agree with a lot of that. I think the J Street interlocking is vitally important. It's way past time that gets made modern. And to have CBTC on 6th Avenue when you have it on Queens Boulevard and on Culver, and they would meet, and it would not be contiguous. We need 6th Avenue done. So this makes total sense. Thank you.
Folks, this is a big one, and we'll obviously be bringing it to the full board. But thank you for listening. It's super important. I just want to acknowledge how much tremendous work has been done by Jamie's team, especially led by Tim, to get us to this point. At this point, let's hear from Frederica Cuenca about that planning, the 20-year needs assessment, and our plans for how do we evaluate future expansion opportunities.
As everybody said, I'm here to give you an update on our 20-year needs process. I also want to introduce Mike Schiffer. He's our SVP for regional planning. And as you might imagine from his title, he is responsible for looking at all of these expansion projects and understanding the travel needs of our region into the future. Whoops, I went a little too far. Sorry about that. Okay. Every time I talk to you about the 20-year needs, I'm going to stress that we are taking a more uniform, robust, and data-driven decision-making approach to our process. And in this, we are following the recommendations of the 2019 Crow audit, which we've mentioned several times here today. So in particular, we are focused on improving the data we use and strengthening the link between operational and capital decisions. We're also committed to transparency within the agency and with our external stakeholders. The planning process starts with the asset assessment and project evaluation. We're doing this now. We are compiling detailed asset inventories about condition, age, and importance of these assets. We use this information to drive priority and sequencing as of our investments to keep the system safe and reliable and easy to use. And we're taking the same data-driven approach to our potential expansion projects. In September of '23, we will publish the 20-year needs assessment, and the 5-year capital program follows the year later. Okay. The main focus of our planning process always has been and always will be to plan for the needs of our existing system. Given the truly staggering scope and complexity of our system that moves this entire region, that focus is critical to our future. Nevertheless, we do need to think about how our network should change, and we must be strategic in how we allocate our limited expansion resources. As we consider possible additions, we know what we want these projects to achieve. With COVID, there's a little less emphasis perhaps on adding capacity, But we know these projects take a long time, and we need to plan for the future when we will have growth and we may face capacity constraints again. At this time, we'll likely be more focused on expanding the reach of the network and serving the changing travel patterns that support trips to new business areas or sub-regional travel. We also looking to support local land use and economic development strategies, and we want to enhance the network resiliency, giving increased travel options and redundancy for the overall transit network. These projects that we have underway today check all of these boxes. And here's a list of potential projects. As you can see, there's no shortage of ideas on what the next project should be. These proposals came from a wide variety of stakeholders throughout the MTA region. Today, we're launching our 20-year needs webpage, which includes brief descriptions of all of these potential projects. We know IBX is a prime candidate, but we are continuing to analyze and advance all projects along with many others. All of these projects listed here will be evaluated as part of our comparative evaluation process. The comparative evaluation process helps us answer the question, how well do these potential projects meet the needs of the future? Here again, we're following the recommendation to be data-driven and transparent. For each potential project, we want to have consistent minimum level of information, ridership, travel time, contributions to network capacity and resiliency. We also need to consider geographic distribution and benefits based on income, race, or ethnicity, and age. And of course, we need to consider cost. We're currently gathering all of this information. While many of these potential projects have been studied previously, some of these studies are from a while back. So we need to make this information apples to apples. For example, on cost, we want to standardize our cost estimating process and get all of these costs into current dollars. Ridership needs to reflect the current model of how people move around the region. So all of these metrics will serve as the basis for a regional conversation among all stakeholders about the merits of these various potential projects. In mid-2023, we'll be ready to share this information, and we'll have stakeholder conversation. Some projects will, move to the forefront, while others might make more sense in the future. And frankly, some might just not make sense at all, based on that they just don't make sufficient contributions to mobility in the region. So the dialogue about these projects will be reflected in the 20-year needs, and that will be, published next fall. So thank you, and if you have any questions, I'm here to take them.
Can I ask a question? So Federica, thank you for that detailed report. When you mean stakeholders, is it RP, like who put together that list?
Yeah, so these come from a lot of different places. Some of them have come from elected officials, some come from staff, people in our own organization who know that others have come from community groups, community ideas, in different areas. So this is really a compendium of all the ideas that have been out there and talked about and might have been studied by different people or problems that have been raised by different groups around the region.
Mr. Glucksman.
Thank you. Very interesting. Could we have the PowerPoint among the committee?
Sure.
All right, thank you.
I think that the answer to that question every time will be yes. You're entitled to have the PowerPoints that are presented to. Right. And I think we always provide them, but we will in this. All right. Any other comments or questions? This is super important. We keep making reference to that Crow study, but what Frederica and her team have done is to just change it from something that had, I would say, more subjectivity and more feel in it to something that is really insisting on being data-driven at every point. They are using for the capital program planning process our enterprise asset management data, which is incredibly detailed information on the capacity and the condition of our assets. and this expansion comparative valuation analysis is in keeping with that. Mr. Brinkman.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I was very pleased to see the Lower Montauk on that list. If you look at a subway map, the older ones that show where the Long Island Railroad is, that runs right through a transit desert. There's no subways in that vicinity, so that could open up quite a bit of expansion for the city in general. So I'm very glad to see it. Hopefully it will be cost effective, but it was just nice to see that on the list.
All right. Thank you, everybody. But on to the next issue. We're going to hear a report from Barney Gray on the station's business unit, followed by the IEC, not to forget the independent engineers reports. Barney.
Good afternoon, Chairman and committee members. My name's Barney Gray, and yes, I'm going to give you an update on the station's program since we met in January. I'm going to start with just an overview of some things that have occurred. We'll go into some work that has been completed since we last met. We'll talk about work that's on the schedule to be awarded this year, and then we're going to dive into some ADA projects, both 3 that have been completed and both 3 that are currently in progress. When we last met in January, we had 173 active projects. We're up to 194 now with a total of a budget of $10 billion. If you look at the pie chart, 5.2 of our program is dedicated to ADA. Keeping the system in a state of good repair is the second largest area of our program with $4.2 billion. We then have, and that also includes integrity of the stations and improving reliability of our existing elevators and escalators also. The small pie chart, which is 6% of our other part of the program, is just miscellaneous work and repairs that make up the rest of the program. In the 6 months that have passed since we last presented, we completed 5 projects just totaling under $600 million. We kicked off the year with the opening of 3 new elevators at 170th Street on the 4 line. We increased accessibility to the complex at Times Square and made the shuttle accessible. And we added 2 new elevators at Livonia on the L. I will highlight these projects later in the presentation also. I do want to point out the completion of 23 total elevators at 10 stations collectively, consisting of both hydraulic and traction elevators, increasing our ADA reliability at those 10 existing stations. 3 out of our 5 projects were completed on time. Livonia did experience a delay, and the replacement of traction elevators was completed 2 months in advance. So despite delays in the schedule at Livonia, all 5 of our projects were completed within budget. In addition to completions, we have an ambitious commitment plan this year. We're seeking to award nearly $3 billion in projects, so both the 3rd and 4th quarters will be really busy for the station's business unit. I just want to talk about building capacity for just a moment. This slide represents just how fast the pace of project awards in the station's business unit has accelerated. If you look at the blue bars at the bottom of the chart, they represent the increase in commitments over the years, while the orange line represents a significant increase in the volume of construction activity since the inception of MTA construction and development, which, by the way, also coincides with the COVID pandemic. With $1.4 billion in awards, 2021 was a record year for stations, and this is a testament to our growth, and we expect to double that pace in 2022, and that continues for the remainder of the capital program. While it will be tough, there will be some inherent challenges. Strategies like bundling projects into larger contracts and alternative procurement strategies such as design-build give both myself and the team confidence in our ability to successfully deliver the program both this year and in the years to come. I did mention earlier accessibility is our primary focus. From 2020 to now, we have awarded projects to make 23 stations accessible. We have an additional plan for this year and another 18 for the following year. And you can see from the map on the right the borough equity in our commitment to accessibility, as it does incorporate all 5 of the boroughs. I want to highlight 3 ADA projects in construction. This project, 149th Street Grand Concourse in Tremont, was discussed in our last CPC meeting in January, and it does remain on schedule and within budget. There is, however, a potential for delay on this project, but we feel the delay will be mitigated. You'll hear more about this report in the IEC's report here just shortly. ADA Package 1, the second project I want to highlight, is also on schedule and on budget, and was also reported in our last CPC meeting. This project is now 45% complete, up 10% from the January meeting, and as you may remember, from the bids for this project came in significantly lower than the estimate, validating our new bundling and design build procurement approach. We do recognize there's potential delay of 4 to 6 months on this project due to delay in obtaining agreements with National Grid for utility relocations. However, the project team is working with the contractor to come up with what I believe a recovery schedule with acceleration, which should mitigate most of these concerns. ADA Package 2 was awarded in December of last year and is anticipated to be completed by the fall of 2024. This package includes work at 8 stations, which will install a total of new elevators at 6 stations, the replacement of 5 elevators at 2 stations at both Marcy Avenue and Flushing, and renewal work at one of the ADA stations at Woodhaven Boulevard, which is also reflected in the rendering on the screen. We're currently working with stakeholders to expedite commercial agreements to further advance and move this project along as well. So now let's take a look at one of our first ADA projects we completed this year. And I'd like to direct your attention to the pie chart in the upper left, which highlights we completed this project on time and on budget also. It includes both ADA and state of good repair, which is a testament to our commitment to really looking at the work we perform while at a station and being just a little smarter in the way we do things. Second project we completed since our last presentation is the Times Square Shuttle. This was completed March of 2022. Again, completed on time and on budget. And if you have not had a chance to visit the station, I would encourage you to stop by and see not only the work that we perform, but also the amazing art that was part of the improvement at this station. The final project I want to highlight is at Livonia. It was completed in May 2022 within budget. However, there was a 2-month delay to implementation of a new two-way communication system that allows agents and customers to initiate emergency calls with the texting function. This texting function furthers our ADA commitment as a first-of-its-kind system for the hearing impaired. This project includes 2 new elevators and ADA accessibility improvements that are part of a larger project that includes state-of-good repair improvements like platform repair, installation of ADA boarding area with tactile strips, and the expansion of the control house at this station. This station and the nearby Junius Street Station, which will also be made accessible under the current capital program, will be connected with an accessible free transfer in the future. So in summary, let me say we have been very busy since our last meeting and the work doesn't slow down. I've covered just a snapshot of our efforts on just a few of our projects. But as I mentioned, construction work is just ramping up as we continue to award large project bundles. Our focus continues to be our commitment to ADA, and we will continue to surgically and tactically address the worst of the worst conditions. And we continue to look for opportunities to address additional station defects as funding permits. My team anticipates communication and coordination challenges in managing an enormous program. Many of our projects will have overlapping active construction schedules. Bundling of projects has allowed us to not only increase the pace and capacity of our work, but also reduce the impacts our work have on our customer. And as we explore opportunities to expand on ways to deliver projects better, faster, and cheaper, we continue to expand on procurement strategies into a variety of design-build methodologies. We will continually work with internal staff at C&D, other departments, stakeholders, and third parties to streamline the process and to ensure that any asset opening and closing or any changes are communicated to all stakeholders, public riders, and especially our ADA community. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to I'll take any comments after the IEC does their report. Thank you.
Okay, so at this point, we're going to hear from the IEC, and then we'll hear questions from the board as well, right? Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. The IEC reports begin on page 19 of your committee book. This month, the IEC is reporting on 4 station projects, which will provide 43 ADA elevators at 17 individual stations. The IEC monitoring of the C&D Stations business unit, as with other business units, is performed through a combination of continuous risk-based monitoring by our project managers, as well as exception-based reporting through the traffic light report, which was last reported to the committee in June. Regarding monitored projects, on Tremont Avenue and 149th Street Station project, the IEC sees the risk of a 3-month delay from July to October 2023 due to late supply of power by Con Ed to the electrical distribution room at 149th Street. Increased manpower and work shifts are necessary to accelerate productivity and recover lost time. Regarding the 8-station ADA Package 1, Stations is working to pull the project back to its original substantial completion date, which requires the contractor to accelerate their work activities. Absent a recovery plan, the IEC is forecasting a delay of up to 6 months due to previously reported issues, as Barney mentioned, with National Grid utility relocation work. ADA Package 2 and 68th Street Hunter College remain on time. All 4 of the monitored projects are reporting as being on budget, and the IEC concurs with this. Risks remain around utility relocation, supply chain issues involving elevators and structural steel deliveries, as well as contractor resource availability, and these risks must be continually mitigated so projects do not incur delay. Also, as work moves to inspection, testing, and commissioning, New York City Transit's elevator and escalator group support becomes critical in bringing these elevators online for public use. It's the IEC's understanding that sufficient forces are in place for the current workload, and plans are being progressed for the added staff needed when Package 2 ramps up installations. Regarding the traffic light, the C&D Stations business unit is performing well overall, and 65 of the 65 station projects being reported in the June traffic light report, 95% of the projects remain on time and on budget, with only one project, a non-public facing one, experiencing delay. Some observations on the program. The recent MTA court settlement is a huge leap forward towards ADA accessibility. Combined with the necessary funding through legislation, it provides a framework to allow the MTA to reimagine capital plan delivery on a grand scale, and the IEC has seen that the planning is underway at C&D, as is industry outreach for additional qualified firms. In addition to a potential increase in competition among elevator and escalator manufacturers and installers, the MTA is also looking forward to opportunities such as economy of scale pricing, more bundling of work to maximize efficient project delivery, and inclusion of long-term maintenance agreements in construction contracts, which could potentially result in higher quality initial installation. The IEC recognizes that construction at the scale being considered will pose challenges to the MTA, such as resource availability, competition for track time, and as well as management and coordination of a much larger program across multiple geographical locations and at a sustained level. Close coordination with elevator, escalator manufacturing, and installation firms is crucial to minimize impact of supply chain issues that we've seen. A third-party utility agreement has been secured with Con Ed on one ADA project that was awarded in January and is being incorporated into subsequent design packages. Other utility stakeholder agreements are in progress, but need to be accelerated significantly to keep this program on track. Finally, as cited in our Package 1 IEC report in the book, machine roomless type elevators are now being utilized MTA-wide to deliver ADA accessibility more efficiently, often reducing the excavation and space-constrained locations while providing speedier and more efficient units with fewer parts requiring maintenance. These innovative approaches are being considered by C&D to deliver the station's program will aid the station's business unit in achieving their planned results. That concludes my remarks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you to the IEC. Board members, anything, questions or comments for Barney, Mark, or on any of the issues that we've discussed today? Okay. As you can see, there's a ton of work. there's a ton of work going on. ADA is half of Barney's work. I just want to acknowledge, Barney, your leadership and what you and Tony Fabrizio and Bill Montanilli have done to create this new stations group within C&D. Since you came to us from Chicago, you've been shouldering a lot of burden, and it's already starting to show how much progress you've made, so congratulations. Okay. Mr. Cannon, would you do the procurements, please?
Thank you, Chair Lever. Construction and Development has 7 procurement actions being brought to the Capital Program Committee this month. 7 are in the competitive section, 1 is in the ratification section. There are 3 items requesting approval to award publicly advertised and competitively solicited design build contracts. The first one to Skanska Railroad Construction Joint Venture for improvements on the Flushing Line in the amount of $199,955,000. The second to Skanska USA Civil Northeast Incorporated to replace 17 escalators at 6 subway stations located in the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Manhattan in the amount of $114,970,000. And the third to EJ Electric Installation Company in the amount of $25,450,000 for replacement and relocation of the Queens Midtown Tunnel Refueling Station and Queens Service Building switchgear. There are 3 modifications to an existing contract for upgrades for the 53rd Street tube work being performed by TC Electrical and J-Track Joint Venture in the amount of $5,378,820 to address deterioration and corrosion of the electrical systems. The last item is for the ratification of a modification with Voltamp Electrical Contractors in the amount of $3,775,000 for the replacement of the existing transformer and rectifier equipment at the 41st Street substation in Queens. These items are described in detail in the staff summaries contained within your committee books, and I submit them for your consideration and vote.
Yeah, I mean, we go through this formality, but obviously everybody knows that you receive a detailed briefing on every one of these procurements that David's just enumerated. Can I have a motion to approve? Okay, is there any discussion of any of these matters? Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? The motion is approved. I think that concludes today's meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. We're at adjournment.